I saw my wife through a cafe window leaning into her boss like we were the ones having an affair. With denial, I chose patience over spectacle, started a timeline, and reached out to his wife. This is how I turned a quiet discovery into a methodical reckoning. I'm writing this because watching felt like agreeing. I'm a husband in the US, routine and reliable, the guy who grills on Sundays and fixes the dripping tap. 2 weeks ago, I passed a downtown coffee shop and saw my wife through the glass with her boss, shoulders tilted like magnets that had stopped resisting. His hand hovered near her wrist, and the look they shared wasn't office safe. I didn't knock. I kept walking, past my reflection, past the urge to make a scene, and filed the moment in that part of the mind where you keep birth dates and passwords. We live outside Phoenix, all sun glare and cul-de-sacs. I met her at a volunteer day, paint in her hair, and we built a small life with big promises. Honesty, team first, no secrets. I handle IT for a medical group. She does corporate real estate and speaks fluent calendar. Lately, her hours stretched, the perfume changed, and the phone stayed face down. I told myself I was being paranoid until the glass told me I wasn't. Confrontation gives cheaters a head start. Patience gives you proof. I opened a note on my phone titled Timeline and started a clean list. Coffee shop, 4:22 p.m., hand near wrist, laughter too quiet for colleagues. I bought a cheap voice recorder for her car and ordered a clock camera for the living room. I called a family lawyer from my car at lunch and asked hypotheticals. She said, document everything, don't tip your hand, let patterns incriminate themselves. The first week was static, then patterns clicked. A late meeting landed on the same evenings her boss's truck stayed after hours. A hair tie I didn't recognize appeared on our console. She wore the cardigan she reserves for looking harmless and sharp. I cooked dinner and she said the client might turn into drinks. My fork paused midair and then lowered like nothing happened. Anger is a match. Planning is a blueprint. I chose the blueprint. I took photos through the cafe glass on a second lunch break stakeout. In one, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, like he owned the future. Ownership is settled by titles. I was preparing mine. I traced him online. Mark, married 12 years, 2 kids, golden retriever, charity 10K finisher. His wife appeared in holiday photos with clear eyes and a calm smile. I felt something precise lock into place. If I was going to burn the lie, I wanted the truth standing beside me. I created an email from a neutral name. Subject: you deserve to hear this from me, not a rumor. I wrote that I am married to one of Mark's direct reports and attached photos taken in public places with dates and times. I said I wasn't looking for a fight, only clarity, and I would meet wherever she felt safe. I didn't press send yet. Once words leave, you can't call them back. I wanted one more confirmation I could show a judge and a conscience and keep both steady. At home, I acted normal. We watched a show. She laughed at something on her phone and angled the screen away on reflex. When she showered, I placed the clock camera on a shelf and slid the recorder beneath the passenger seat of her car, with my heart ticking like it wanted to leave without me. The next day at 12:41 p.m., they met again. He sat next to her instead of across. Their knees touched. She flinched for decency and then didn't. I took 3 photos, and the world narrowed to the shutter sound. The recorder gave me what the glass couldn't. Their voices in a parking lot, the way she said we should keep using the coffee place because no one from the office goes there, the way he said he booked a room near the freeway just in case the client dinner runs late. I listened once, jaw set, and saved the file to an encrypted drive labeled Documents like any other spreadsheet. I called the lawyer again. She said the word leverage, not revenge. I wrote both in my timeline. That night, I finally pressed send to Mark's wife. 10 minutes later, a reply landed. "Thank you. Call me when you can." She included a number. My hands shook, not with doubt, but with recognition of the step I'd just taken. If she was the person her photos suggested, she deserved honesty and a plan that didn't reduce either of us to props in their story. I sat at the kitchen table with the clock camera's red light winking faintly behind me and decided what kind of man I would be next. I would not be the man who begs cheaters to explain math they know doesn't add up. I would not be the man who breaks dishes and gives them a reason to call me unstable. I would be the man who makes a record and keeps his voice flat. Tomorrow, I will call her. We will compare notes. If she wants out, I'll help her land on her feet. If she wants heat, I'll show her where the tinder is stacked. For now, I told my wife goodnight, kissed her temple, and watched the woman I loved roll away from me into sleep that felt borrowed, as if the night had placed it on layaway under someone else's name.
The next morning, I called her, Mark's wife, from my car before work. Her voice was steady in a way that made me believe she had rehearsed this possibility for years, maybe not with details, but with that intuition spouses sometimes bury. I told her everything I had, the photos, the timeline, the audio file, and I promised I would share them with her safely. No ambushes, no theatrics. She listened without interrupting, then asked if I would meet her in person. We chose a public park with wide spaces and families everywhere, a place where no confrontation could spiral. When I saw her in person, she looked exactly like in the photos, calm but carrying weight behind her eyes. And she thanked me before I even sat down. We compared calendars and texts. Her husband's late nights matched my wife's. A sudden interest in gym classes corresponded with his supposed business dinners. It was like flipping transparency sheets on an overhead projector, the lies aligning perfectly until you could see the pattern glowing. She told me she suspected but never had the courage to check. Now, she wanted more than truth. She wanted them exposed. That word tightened something in me. Exposed meant no plausible denials, no more pretending. We laid out steps like co-conspirators. First, gather irrefutable evidence. Second, control the timing. Third, ensure no collateral damage to her kids. She didn't want them ambushed in the fallout, and I respected that. I offered to continue surveillance, and she agreed. I ordered another recorder, this time for her car, and a hidden pen camera. I never imagined myself in this role, orchestrating a silent siege, but once the line was crossed, I refused to be the fool standing still. At home, I kept the mask on. My wife hummed while packing an overnight bag for a supposed client retreat. She asked me to trust her. I said I did. The words tasted like rust. While she showered, I checked the recorder from her car. Voices again. Him saying, "One more night won't hurt. He has no idea." Her laugh, sharp, nervous, guilty. I sent the file to his wife. She replied with a single line, "Got it. We wait." That night, I lay awake, rehearsing the confrontation. I pictured the look on her face when denial would fail, the silence when evidence landed like a gavel. But I didn't want an explosion. I wanted precision. The next day, I met with a divorce attorney in person. She told me everything I needed, how to freeze accounts, how to secure the house, how to ensure custody if things got ugly. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Document everything. The person who stays calm controls the story." I carried those words out like ammunition. The following weekend, his wife invited me to her house while he was working late. We set up her laptop on the kitchen counter and reviewed evidence together, each clip pulling another stitch from the fabric of their lies. She asked if I wanted to expose them publicly. I said not yet. My plan was slower, crueler. I wanted them to implode on their own, surrounded by their own contradictions, with no room left to pivot. I wanted my wife to realize the exact moment her life tilted, and that it was by my hand, not fate's. We talked about timing. We agreed on waiting until after his company's quarterly event, when reputations were on full display. She smiled at that, the kind of smile that knows patience is just a sharper blade. At home, my wife returned from her retreat, glowing in a way she hadn't in months. She kissed my cheek, left her suitcase in the hallway, and told me the trip was productive. I nodded, took the suitcase to the bedroom, and while she was in the shower, I slipped her blouse into a sealed bag for DNA testing. I didn't need the result, but proof was a shield in court. My phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Soon, we'll cut them where it hurts." I stared at the screen and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about reclaiming control, about refusing to play the background character in a script they wrote for me. They thought they were careful. They thought love made me blind. But love is only blind until it isn't. And then it sees everything, sharper than ever, and it remembers. I went to bed that night beside my wife, her hair damp from the shower, her breathing even. I stared at the ceiling and counted the days until the quarterly event, until the stage lights came up, until the trap snapped shut.
The quarterly event was held at a sleek downtown hotel, the kind of place where everything gleamed too perfectly and everyone pretended their lives matched the shine. I wore my best suit, polished shoes, and the calm expression I had been rehearsing for weeks. My wife spent hours getting ready, slipping into a dark green dress she claimed she bought for the occasion. She looked radiant, undeniably so, but all I could see was the shadow of his hands having been there before. We arrived together, smiling for colleagues and friends, her hand resting on my arm as if we were the picture of stability. Mark was already there, shaking hands, the charming executive everyone seemed to admire. His wife stood beside him, the silent partner with the kind of composure only someone carrying a secret could maintain. When our eyes met across the room, there was no smile, no wink, just the steel of shared knowledge. I moved through the crowd like a spectator in my own life, conversations fading as I replayed the plan in my head. Step 1 had already been set in motion. Earlier that day, I had scheduled timed emails with attachments, photos, recordings, and a concise summary of their affair, set to send to her boss, Mark's board of directors, and a few carefully chosen mutual friends. They would all hit inboxes midway through his keynote speech. Step 2 was silence. No confrontations, no raised voices, just the weight of exposure crashing down in real time. As we sat at our assigned table near the stage, my wife whispered in my ear that she was proud of him, that Mark was brilliant. She didn't realize her words cut sharper than glass. I nodded, biting back the truth that her admiration was about to burn. The speeches began. A few executives went up, numbers were recited, jokes exchanged. Then it was his turn. Mark walked to the stage, confident, smiling at the applause. My wife clapped too eagerly, leaning forward, her eyes locked on him. His wife didn't move. She kept her hands folded in her lap, watching with the stillness of a hunter. Mark began his speech, talking about growth, innovation, the company's future. His voice was steady, practiced, but then I noticed it. The first vibration of phones around the room, a ripple of distraction. One executive checked his email, frowned, then leaned to whisper to the person beside him. Another shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at Mark with new eyes. It spread like a wave, a silent storm rolling through the audience. Mark faltered mid-sentence just for a moment, then regained rhythm. But the looks, the whispers, the shifting energy, they were impossible to ignore. My wife glanced around, confused, sensing something but not yet connecting it. Then her phone buzzed in her purse. She reached down, unlocked it, and her face drained of color as she scrolled. Her hand trembled, eyes flicking from the screen to Mark, then to me. I kept my expression neutral, sipping water like nothing at all was happening. On stage, Mark's voice cracked as he noticed the shift, as people pulled out phones, murmurs swelling. He tried to push through, but the words died in his throat. Finally, someone from the board walked onto the stage, whispered in his ear, and the microphone was cut. The room buzzed louder, chaos brewing beneath polished surfaces. His wife stood slowly, smoothing her dress, and for the first time she smiled, cold, deliberate, as she turned and walked out. I watched Mark's face collapse under the weight of recognition, the realization that the walls he built out of lies had caved in. My wife grabbed my arm, hissing, "What did you do?" Her voice was panicked, desperate, the mask slipping. I leaned closer, my tone calm and razor sharp, and said, "I just told the truth." She stared at me,
eyes wide, lips parted, but no words came. The perfect night she thought she was walking into had turned into a funeral for her illusions. As security escorted Mark off stage, the event unraveled. People leaving in hurried clusters, their conversations laced with gossip and judgment. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and offered my wife my arm as though nothing had happened. She hesitated, then took it, her grip tight, her breath unsteady. We walked out together into the cool night, silence stretching between us like a gulf too wide to cross. My phone buzzed with a single message from Mark's wife. Perfect. I slipped it back into my pocket, watching my wife's reflection in the glass doors as we left. She looked smaller now, diminished, as if the light had drained out of her. The war wasn't over, but the first strike had landed, and I wasn't done yet.
The fallout began before we even made it home. My wife's phone wouldn't stop buzzing, each notification like a hammer cracking her carefully constructed life. She didn't speak during the drive, staring out the passenger window as if the darkness outside could shield her from reality. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, the hum of the engine the only sound between us. When we pulled into the driveway, she finally turned to me, her eyes red and wet, and whispered, "Why would you do this to me?" I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that made her flinch. "To you? I didn't do anything to you. I exposed what you did to me." Her mouth opened and closed, like she had words, but none came out. She stormed into the house, slamming the door, leaving me outside with the night air wrapping cold around me. I stayed in the car for a while, scrolling through the reactions. Emails from people I barely knew were already coming in, some pitying, some praising, all confirming that the story had spread far beyond the ballroom. Mark's downfall was public and spectacular. By morning, the local business press had picked it up, with headlines hinting at scandal without spelling it out. By noon, it wasn't just business gossip, it was trending. The company released a statement that Mark had been placed on indefinite leave pending an internal review. He was finished, and he knew it. His wife filed for divorce the same day, her lawyer moving quickly, backed by evidence I had shared privately with her weeks earlier. Meanwhile, my wife crumbled. She tried to act normal at first, making coffee in the morning, going through the motions, but her hands shook and her smile was brittle. Friends stopped calling, her coworkers whispered. Every room we walked into seemed colder, quieter, until she couldn't bear to leave the house. She begged me to undo it, to say it wasn't true, to make it disappear. But there's no putting a bullet back in a gun once it's fired. One evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open to job listings in another city. She looked up at me with hollow eyes and said, "We can start over, somewhere new. No one has to know." I stared at her, this woman I thought I knew, and realized she still didn't understand. She wasn't sorry for what she had done, she was sorry for being caught. I walked past her without answering, pouring myself a drink and letting the silence speak for me. The messages from Mark, though, told a different story. He tried calling me at first, then shifted to texts, long rants that swung between threats and pleas. "You ruined me," one read. Another said, "I'll make you regret this." But the one that made me laugh out loud simply said, "She's not worth this. Let it go." He thought I had done it for her, that it was some twisted attempt to win her back. He never realized the truth. This wasn't about saving her. It was about burning down everything they built together and making them watch it collapse. I stopped responding. His words meant nothing now. My wife, however, grew more frantic as the days passed. She alternated between sobbing apologies and venomous accusations, screaming that I was vindictive, cruel, obsessed. Maybe I was, but every time I looked at her, I remembered the smirk on her face the night she told me Mark was brilliant, the way her eyes had shone for him instead of me. That image fueled me more than her tears ever could. One night, after another argument that left her curled on the couch, I sat in my office and drafted the final step. Divorce papers. Not rushed, not sloppy, but precise and devastating. I had already spoken to a lawyer, already secured my position, already ensured she would walk away with nothing but the wreckage of her choices. When I slid the documents across the table the next morning, her face collapsed. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw, "we can fix it." I leaned back in my chair, studying her, and replied, "There's nothing left to fix. You broke it. I'm just cleaning up the mess." She cried, begged, even tried to threaten me with taking half, but she didn't realize the ground had already been pulled out from under her. I had protected everything, planned every angle. She was trapped in the very cage she helped build. Watching her realize it was like watching a flame flicker out, slow and inevitable. I should have felt pity. Instead, I felt free. The war was almost over, but I wasn't finished twisting the knife.
The divorce proceedings dragged on, but I had already won before the first hearing. My lawyer was sharp, meticulous, and relentless. Armed with the evidence of her affair, the financial discrepancies I uncovered, and the narrative of betrayal that tilted sympathy squarely in my direction. She walked into the courtroom thinking she could play the victim, only to be dismantled by cold facts and her own lies. Every time her attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, the judge reminded them of her choices, her betrayal, and the undeniable trail of proof. When the gavel struck, she was left with little more than her personal belongings, while I kept the house, the accounts, and my dignity intact. Outside the courthouse, she chased me down the steps, her voice cracking as she shouted, "You destroyed me!" People turned to look, and I stopped, letting her words hang in the air before replying, "No, you destroyed yourself. I just told the truth." She froze, trembling, and for a moment I saw the woman she used to be, buried under layers of lies and desperation. But the moment passed, and all that remained was the ruin she had become. Mark, on the other hand, spiraled faster than I expected. The company dropped him permanently, and within weeks he was blacklisted in the industry. Rumors swirled about his failed projects, his personal scandals, his messy divorce. His wife gutted him in court, taking the house, the cars, even custody of the kids. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was crashing on a friend's couch, drinking too much, talking too loud about how he'd been set up. He tried once more to reach out to me, showing up at my office building like a ghost that refused to rest. He cornered me in the parking lot, his face gaunt, eyes bloodshot, reeking of whiskey. "You think you won?" he spat, his voice hoarse. "You think this makes you a man?" I didn't flinch, didn't give him the satisfaction of anger. I just looked him dead in the eye and said, "I didn't need to win, Mark. I just needed you to lose." Security escorted him out, and I never saw him again. My wife, ex-wife now, tried to linger on the edges of my life. Emails, late-night calls, messages that swung between pleading and accusing. I ignored them all. She even showed up at the house once, standing in the rain with mascara streaked down her face, pounding on the door until her fists bled. I stood behind the curtain, watching, my heart cold as stone, until she finally collapsed and left. That was the last time she tried. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was peace. I filled my days with work, with rebuilding, with rediscovering who I was without her shadow hanging over me. I went on drives down long highways, the hum of the engine and the blur of lights soothing in ways her words never had. Friends who had once drifted away came back, offering support and laughter that felt real, not forced. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving, I was living. But revenge is a strange thing. It doesn't end the moment the enemy falls. It lingers, a quiet satisfaction that seeps into your bones, reminding you of the fire you walked through and the ashes you left behind. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't regret it. They had taken something from me, trust, love, the life I thought I had, and I had taken everything from them in return. Fair trade. Still, late at night, when the world was still and quiet, I sometimes thought about the moment I first found out, the betrayal cutting through me like a blade. That man, broken and humiliated, no longer existed. He had burned away in the fire of my revenge. What stood in his place was someone harder, sharper, someone who understood that love without loyalty is nothing more than a lie waiting to unravel. And I swore to myself I would never fall for that lie again. But as the months passed and the dust settled, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't finished yet, because revenge had freed me, but it also left a void, and something deep inside whispered that the void wouldn't stay empty forever. Life after the storm felt strangely quiet, like standing in the middle of an abandoned street after a riot. The chaos was gone, but the echoes of what had happened clung to me in ways I hadn't expected. I had my freedom, my house, my money, my reputation restored, and yet there were moments when I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling at night, wondering how close I had come to losing it all, because I trusted the wrong person. My ex-wife faded into the background of my life, a shadow I no longer needed to acknowledge. I heard through whispers that she was working odd jobs, bouncing between apartments, sometimes staying with friends who eventually pushed her out when her bitterness became too heavy to carry. The woman who once thought she was untouchable was now a ghost of herself, and while I didn't rejoice in her misery, I didn't pity her either. She had made her choices, and the consequences were hers alone. Mark disappeared completely, swallowed by the consequences of his downfall. Some said he left town, chasing opportunities that no longer existed. Others claimed he stayed but kept to the margins of society, too ashamed to show his face. I never looked for him. He was nothing to me now, not even worth the energy of hatred. One evening, sitting alone in my living room with the soft hum of the TV in the background, I thought about revenge. It had consumed me for so long, driven every decision, sharpened every word I spoke. It was fire, and I had fed it until there was nothing left of them. And yet, the fire had left me standing. I hadn't been destroyed, I had been reforged. Stronger, sharper, clearer about what mattered. I started to reconnect with life in small ways. A coworker invited me out for drinks, and for the first time in months, I said yes. We laughed, shared stories, and when I drove home that night, I realized I hadn't thought about my ex or Mark once during the entire evening. That was progress. Weeks turned into months, and I found myself rebuilding. Not just my life, but myself. I started running again, feeling the burn in my legs and the wind in my lungs. I joined a weekend hiking group, rediscovering the beauty of the world outside of betrayal. And somewhere along the way, I met someone. She wasn't flashy, not the kind of person who needed to be the center of attention. She was grounded, kind, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke and whose presence felt like calm after years of chaos. We took it slow, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in a long time, I wanted to savor the moments rather than rush through them. Trust came carefully, but it came. And as it did, I realized something important. Revenge had closed a chapter, but love, real, loyal, honest love, was what started a new one. Looking back, I don't regret what I did. They betrayed me, and I made sure they paid the price, but I also don't live in that moment anymore. It's a scar, not an open wound. A reminder, not a prison. And maybe that's the ultimate revenge. Not just watching them fall, but rising so far above the wreckage that they can no longer touch me. In the end, I didn't just survive betrayal. I turned it into the fuel to rebuild a life better than the one they tried to steal from me. And as I look forward now, hand in hand with someone who shows me what loyalty truly means, I know this much. The story of their betrayal will always be part of my past, but it will never define my future. My future is mine, and it's brighter than anything they could ever destroy.